Hello, and welcome to our video on making frequency tables in Excel. We know that a frequency table tells us how often something in particular occurs. This is easy to see when we have categorical data. Over here, we see pets and the number. We've got cat, dog, fish, bird, and the number that fit in with each type of animal. If I were to make a bar graph from this, I would have my cat bar, my dog bar, my fish bar, and so on. Okay. Now this is easy because it's just cat and then the number of people who own cats. When we have quantitative data, it can be a little bit trickier. Here we've got cola can weights, and we've got a whole bunch of different weights. I don't want to make a category for each individual soda weight. What I want to do is figure out the span and then chop that into pieces. Right? To find the span, we'll start by finding the minimum cola weight, then we'll find the maximum cola weight. We'll take the difference between the two, and that gives us the range, which is a measure of variation of the data. Then we'll decide how we want to cut up the range into different parts. The maximum weight is given by the equals max function. Open parentheses on that, and then scroll down on all this data. Hit enter. Our minimum weight is equals min, open parentheses. Again, scroll down on everything. Okay. Now we want to find the range, which is how far it is from the minimum to the maximum. So range equals max minus min. In this case, it equals E5 minus E6. So it has a range of 0.0196. That's not very big. Now we want to take all of this data and put it into categories. But since this is quantitative data and it's continuous, we're going to call them bins instead of categories. To figure out how wide I want each bin, one trick is to say, how many bins do I really want? Okay? So maybe I want, for example, 6 bins total. Okay. I can take the range divided by the number of bins, and that gives us a nice value for how wide I want my bins to be. Now this width, we don't have to use the exact value we come up with. For example, if we do equals 0.0196 divided by 6, I get this kind of crazy looking piece. So instead of doing 0.00327 and then however many extra decimal places, I could say bin width is going to equal 0.003. Now that's a little bit smaller, so it may give me 7 bins instead of 6, but that's okay. 6 was just a rough idea. Okay. I'm going to start with the minimum bin. Okay. Our minimum weight is 0.7742. I'm going to go ahead and just add about 0.3 to that. So this will be 0.777. Okay, that's my minimum bin. I took this minimum value, added about this much to get the smallest bin. Now watch the video on how Excel puts data into bins, if you haven't already. But just a reminder, for this bin, when I do the work, it's going to count up how many of the data values are 0.777 or below. Now our next data value would be 0.780, and that's because 0.777 plus 0.003, which is our bin width, is 0.78. So this is our minimum bin plus bin width. That's how we got the next bin. Now that I have 2 bins, I can use Excel to find the rest using the dragging feature. I want to keep dragging until I get to a maximum value that is a little bit larger than what's here, 0.79. So I have to keep going until my bin is larger than a maximum weight. Drag here with the small black plus, grab, don't drop it. Notice here I've got 0.789, 0.792, 0.798. I need to go a little bit larger, 0.801. Okay, so those are all of our bins. Okay. To find the bin width, start by finding the maximum value, then find the minimum value, then find the range. Then, if you have an idea of how many bins you want, and for this class, a lot of times 5 or 6 bins is sufficient, take your range divided by the number of bins, and that'll give you something for your bin width. Then start calculating your bins, take the minimum value plus something that's about this big, and then drag until you get to something that's a little bit bigger than the maximum amount. Okay, now that we have our bins, we can use the Excel histogram function to make a frequency table. First thing, in order to do that, you need to have a data tab here. Click on that, and you need to have a data analysis tool pack. You'll notice it's missing on mine, so I'm going to insert that. To do that, we'll go over to File, scroll down until you see Options toward the bottom, and then on the left, click Add-ins. Okay. Here are all kinds of crazy add-ins that could be used. I'm going to go to the bottom of this page where it says Manage Excel Add-ins and click Go. I want Analysis Toolpack and Analysis Toolpack VBA, so I'm going to click on each of those, click OK, and ta-da! Data analysis appears. It should be similar for most of you, no matter which version of Excel you have. If you have a MacBook, it might be slightly different, but it should be the same general idea. Now that data analysis is here in the data ribbon, I can click on it, and I can scroll down from this whole list and pick histogram. All this actually does for us is make the frequency table. So I click on histogram, hit OK, and then I need to fill out the input range, the bin range, and then the output range if I don't want it to go to a new workbook, although a new workbook is fine at this point. The input range is all of the original data. So right now, input range would be all of these different data values. Click here, scroll all the way down, and you'll see that they're in dollar signs because the input range should not change no matter what kind of craziness you end up doing later on. Then the bin range, these are all of the values where you want the different categories to be separated. Okay, so we will highlight the bin range. Okay. The default is to go to New Worksheet. That's totally fine. I do not have labels selected. You don't want that. That means when you highlight, only highlight the numbers. Okay. Then we're going to click OK. And ta-da, we've got the bins and the frequency. Notice that in the More row, there's a 0, which is always what we want. If there's not a 0 there, it means we went too far. Notice that for these two bins, they're actually both bigger than the maximum amount. I must have read that wrong. So when I'm making my histogram, I don't need to include these values because they don't have any data and they're beyond the maximum value. Okay. The last piece you might want to do here is make a relative frequency column, which is basically a percent column. Right? You can do relative frequency as decimals or as percents. To do this, we're going to add together all of the data values. Right? So I could do equals sum, highlight all of this stuff, and there are 36 data values. To find the relative frequency in the first bin, I will say equals 3. All right, so I clicked on that for the cell reference, divided by the total here, which is 36. And again, since I want to divide by 36 every time, I am going to put dollar signs around the B13 so that when I drag, the B13 does not change. All right, so that's my relative frequency in decimal form. Okay. If I want it in percent form, I'm going to take this value times 100. I can can double click and it fills down, and this is all in percents. All right, so that is making the frequency table in Excel. If you have any questions, contact your instructor or post them into the discussion boards.